Welcome to the Reclamation Project. I'm your host, Julianne Vaccaro, Women's Transformation Coach. Get ready to reclaim your power in every area of your life, on every level of who you are, so you can live out your purpose with total embodiment. By listening to the Reclamation Project, you'll walk away having done deep dives into your mindset, body image, nutrition, pleasure, and spirituality. The Reclamation Project is your favorite place to uncover the blocks holding you back from living the life of your dreams. It's your roadmap to stepping into the most authentic, free, fully expressed you in a body you love. Anything is possible, it's all available, and it's already yours. By tuning in, you'll be on the fast track back to self and into your personal power so you can live an aligned, radiant, abundant life. Get ready, because your reclamation starts right now. Thank you so much for being a Reclamation Project podcast listener. I cannot even begin to tell you how much it means to me to have you here and be part of this family. I want to acknowledge you for taking the time out of your day to learn, to grow, and to continue to experience life through the messages of this podcast, be it from solo casts to recorded coaching calls or guest episodes. It means the world to me to have you choose this podcast to fill your ears with. If you love the Reclamation Project and all of the content and topics we jam out on, the best way to spread the message and get these conversations out into the world is by leaving us an iTunes or Spotify review. It's probably one of my favorite things to do, checking on my reviews and hearing how this has impacted your life. So I want you to know your words matter, I'm listening, and your support and feedback is so appreciated. Leaving a review can be as simple as an emoji to your in-depth takeaways from any episode. And I know how precious every second of your day is, so I want to give back to my podcast reviewers. And my give back is an exclusive meditation that I created specifically for the RP listener. So this is the only place to get this meditation, so consider it a VIP offer. Do you want to know what the meditation is? Okay. I'll tell you. So it is one of the processes I use in my one-on-one coaching sessions and on the recorded coaching calls you hear on the podcast. Yeah, I know. So this meditation is something you can use whenever you are feeling resistance, a block, if you are noticing an aspect of yourself giving you some pushback or discomfort. You can also use this meditation if you have a goal in mind and you want to leap further into it. You know those times when you avoid an emotion, you bypass it, or you can't get the hell out of it, like you get super stuck in your head? Yeah, this is a meditation for all of those things. It's a somatic-based meditation, meaning you go into your body, and it will help you clear those blocks and integrate the aspects of yourself so that you can have more space to go after your goals. All you have to do is leave the Reclamation Project an iTunes or Spotify review, screenshot it before you press submit, and then send it to info@juliannevaccaro.com. Again, all you have to do is leave the Reclamation Project an iTunes or Spotify review. Make sure you screenshot the review before you hit submit, because otherwise it'll disappear. And then just send that to info@juliannevaccaro.com. Thank you so much for being a listener, and I'm so excited to gift you this meditation. I hope wherever you are listening to this podcast, it's somewhere juicy and yummy and sensual. I've been playing with my sensual side so much lately with incense and candles and different kinds of material and fluffy things and silky things, and it's just felt so good. I just got out of a really nice long bath and had some incredible insights come through that I wanted to share with you. So today's topic is going to be reclaiming innocence. Innocence is a word that just hits me in a different way. It's held so much for me along my journey that I wasn't really even conscious to. And I think it's important to note that, because a lot of times the things that we are blind to, and I feel like blind to can feel harsh, but like the things that we're working on uncovering in this lifetime based off of our soul's curriculum are often the things that we're blind to. Like, when you have those aha moments, maybe it's been in therapy or coaching or retreat or something like that, or even you're just reading a book and you're like, oh my God, I've never seen this pattern before, and I've been like working this pattern and trying to understand this pattern, but I've never seen it from this perspective. Well, that's kind of what innocence has been for me. I'd never really thought that I needed to reclaim the word innocence because it consciously didn't feel like something that bothered me or had a charge or was important, but it's actually a huge thread line of my story. So we're going to play with innocence today. And while you listen, I'm curious what comes up for you. So just be aware of maybe what threads of your own story get activated during this podcast, and we'll see what happens. So I also want to say too that innocence is something that I've talked a lot about in my content before, not necessarily because of my own thread, but because it's something that is really important to reclaim when we're talking about sexuality. So much of coming home to our body is coming home to our innocence. It's our goodness, but there's like no other word that hits the same way as innocence, like erotic innocence, childlike innocence, right? That is so much of who we truly are at the core, right? Like capital T, truth, like who we really are as divine beings, infinite beings, right? So you might have played with this before. Recently, in the last few weeks, I've just been, as you know, I've been off social media, and so I've been awakened to a lot of different things inside of myself, and it's just more layers and more layers and more consciousness being brought into myself, being dropped in. And there's been these themes in systems that I've been working with. Like, for example, we were working with the primary question that if you've ever done Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins, he works with that system. And then I'm also reading a book on money, and he uses a different system, but there's similar threads, right? Like, you do enough trainings and you do however many workshops and retreats, and everybody has a different style, and you find the methodology and the curriculum that works for you, so to speak. But kind of at the end of the day, like, they're all really similar. They have similar outcomes. They have different ways of explaining it and different ways of it resonating in the way that you need it to resonate for you. But they're all very similar. And so with this book on money that I'm reading, it's all about quantum physics. And I've not actually really dived into quantum physics in full yet. I've done some Joe Dispenza work. And we're doing quantum body work on the table. So we're doing lots of things in the quantum field, but I've never really sat down and studied. And so Joe Dispenza has been in my awareness lately. And in this new book that I'm reading, it's actually all about the quantum. And the way that he explains it has just been next level for me. It's landed. Like, I woke up this morning. Well, actually, let me backtrack. We went to Telluride this weekend because it was Paul's birthday. And we had like a nice 4-day little getaway down in the mountains. And it was just amazing. And he always drives when we go away. And so I had the pleasure of reading. And I was reading this new money book, and I read it on the way down. I would read it in spurts when I was there. And then I read it all the way back. And then I woke up this morning in like such clarity of what was happening in my dream state. It was freaking wild, but it was like I was deepening the understanding of everything that was landing for me from the book. It was like in my dream state, I was just doing the things that almost he was inviting us to do, and like the new perspectives, they were just like, it was like me playing in that space for my whole dream state. It was really, really wild. So I also had the intention today of kind of like, working through the book and taking in notes, and this is going to tie into all of these things and for you. But ultimately, what this book and what the quantum field is really showing you is that it's a game, that it's a big fucking game, right? Everything's an optical illusion. It's a hologram, and everything is a creation of your own consciousness. Consciousness creates these holograms and blah, 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 right? So with it all being a game, you've probably heard me say this before, but I made a post like last year about like choose your game. Choose your game. And that came forward because I had somebody ask me in a podcast interview about the dating game and how do I handle the dating game and all these different things. And I remember my answer just being, well, what game are you really wanting to play, right? Like you are the one, it's all a game, and you're the one that is choosing to play the game. So there's a million different games going on all of the time. Like the game that you actually think you want to be playing, whether it's like, I'm going to just use the examples that I always use, but like a bigger business, a great partnership, like all the things that so many of us are working towards. We think that we're not playing that game, so we're playing this game over here, right? So in the context of the dating game, like a lot of us will get ghosted and we'll feel like it's just hard to find people and all these different things. And like those are the games that we're playing. So with this piece right here, what I want to relay is, what game do you want to be playing? Like you have the keys, and you're actually the one that's creating the game. So if you don't like the game that you're playing, then just don't play it. And you don't play it, you kind of end it, you can collapse it by not giving it energy anymore. Like for a while actually scratch that piece. In the dating game context, she was asking me about finding masculine men, right? And how to really attract a healthy dominant man. And I was saying, like, if you are an independent woman, and this isn't about BDSM or submission, but if you're a woman that is very independent and you're successful, there's not going to be energetically a lot of openings for a dominant man to come in, because he's going to feel, not consciously, but he's going to feel that there's like no space or need for him, right? So the game that you start to play is opening up the space for him to come in, right? Maybe you don't carry the heavy things. Maybe you ask for help. Maybe you lean on the men around you and you start to play that game. So look at the games that you're playing and the things that are causing you the most charge and causing you the most constriction in your life right now, and maybe just become aware of what game it is that you're playing. And if you don't want to play it, then just don't give energy to that anymore and start to move your energy into somewhere else. So with this whole conversation of primary question and the choosing your game, there's often a root, like there's a big root that's at the bottom of all of the things that we experience. Meaning, we have our core wounds, right? You've heard of that before. And if you know my story, you know that I came from an abusive household, and love was abusive for me growing up. And because of my experiences from my younger years, there have been all of these different patterns that have played out in my adult life, especially in relationship, that have stemmed from my original experiences of childhood, right? And you have the same thing. You probably know this. Something that I've been playing with is this innocence piece. Because when you work with finding what your primary question is, which is like, what does it always boil down to for you? Like it's most likely something that's triggered often in your life. Your primary question is something that's probably based around something that you value in life, and you started to value at a really young age, like ages 4 to 9. Primary questions could show up as a theme in many areas of your life. So for me, what it can typically come down to is the question of, what's wrong with me? You've heard me talk about that here if you've listened to the podcast. That's usually where I end up, is what's wrong with me? That's something that stemmed from such an early age in childhood, right? When there was abuse. Like, what did I do wrong to have deserved this? What's wrong with me? Perfectionism was such a big thread in my story, because me being perfect then kept me safe, right? It kept me in a place of, okay, if I can just make sure that I don't do anything wrong, if everything's in order, if myself is in order, everything around me is in order, then I'm safe, then I won't get abused, and then I'll have love. But this piece of what's wrong with me, from the primary question standpoint, you want to kind of find a secondary question that would almost like override it. Like, for example, the opposite of it is what's right with me. Like, what can I find that's right for me? How can I find myself right in every moment? But when I started working it and when I started working it and got more clear, it came down to innocence. It came down to me recognizing that so much of my life has actually been me trying to prove my innocence over and over and over, and that I've created this illusion that I am wrong, that I am bad, that I am guilty. It's something that's so common in the Catholic Church. So if you've done any kind of religious deprogramming, you've probably worked with this before. And most of our human experience is about coming into this world as a divine being, forgetting everything about who we are, and then remembering our truth over and over and over and over again until we just stop forgetting, right? But there's unique threads to that for the individual. And so this piece of innocence, I just started to see that I had created so many different illusions in this crafted reality that I live in, where I've had to prove my innocence over and over and over, right? And in this money book, he talks about how when you are viewing your life from this place, you'll see that the experiences that you had that are playing in the illusion of like playing this game that, you know, is stemming from an early childhood wound, they just don't really make sense. They don't make sense. And it's because you've crafted this ridiculous illusion, and you've just had these like, it almost feels like synchronicities, or these like, what the fuck moments. This doesn't make sense, but you're caught in these places of struggle, right? And one of the biggest memories that came up for me, which was probably one of the biggest like, what the fuck moments, was the ending of an abusive relationship. This was an abusive relationship that just was the kind of, it wasn't the starting point, but it was one of my biggest turning points in my life. And it was when I moved from New York City to Colorado, and I had ended an abusive relationship. And long story short, a couple of weeks into me moving here in this like fresh slate that I had, I found out that I was pregnant. And when I found out that I was pregnant, there was just an inner like, this isn't safe. I don't think this was something that was an accident. And then I went back and found all of this information and text messages and things that were hinting at this that I didn't ever realize until I was pregnant, and then had realized that my ex had planned this and was trying for this. And because there was such a safety piece of this, it was an abusive relationship, it was not a safe environment, and all of these threats started to come in. And so just like this pattern that I had played out for so long in my life, I needed to go to the court system. This was my third partnership that ended with an order of protection. That is a lot of relationships to end up with a restraining order, right? And when you're looking at it through the lens of innocence, you can see that I had created all of these illusions to actually fight for my innocence. Like, there was this illusion that I wasn't innocent, that I wasn't a divine being, that I wasn't good, that I wasn't whole. And so from this early age of having these experiences with my family, where I was the only one in my family that was abused. I was the only one that had any kind of physical abuse. And so it was just this constant theme of like, what's wrong with me? So a court case like this, right? I went to the court system and I got a restraining order and I got it approved. And the way it works is you get a 2-week temporary order of protection, and every state is different, but you get a 2-week order of protection, and then you typically you have to go to court, and you have to try and get a permanent order. At least in the state of Colorado, it's permanent. In New York, I think it's like a year or something like that. And so when I was going through this process, when you do have to go to court to get the full order, the defendant has the option to come in. And so my ex did show up, and it was so incredibly hard. I was still pregnant at this point, and I had to sit in a courtroom with him and like fight for my safety, and needed to really show why this wasn't safe. All the abusive things that he had done to me. I had my roommate come in and show all of the things that he had done. I had documentation of everything. He was abusive with my dogs, all of these different things, right? And at the very end of this court case, the judge looked at me and she said, this relationship is abusive. This falls under the pillar that this is abusive. But in order for you to get a permanent order of protection, you have to hit both pillars. And the second pillar is that, I'm the one that has to judge whether or not I think this is going to be a continuing threat. And she said, and I don't think it's going to be a continuing threat. So you have the choice right now. If you want to try to get a permanent order, you can tell me that and we'll go ahead, but I can't guarantee that you'll get an order of protection. And I sat with myself and I was like, this is one of the hardest decisions. Like, all of this is one of the hardest things that I've ever had to go through. I'm like, there's a being in my body that, like, there was just so much happening, right? And I had to, this person that I had love for, that was, I had been with for a year, although there was abuse, all of these things, like, had to make the decision. And so I made the decision of, I'm not letting this go down without fighting. I need to fight for myself, and I need to know that I did everything that I could to protect myself. And so I will go ahead with the hope that I will get a permanent order. And she went in her back chambers, and then she came back out and she said, I don't approve. And she said, this court case is done, and that's it. Just like that. Everything was just done. And it was one of the hardest things that I ever had to do. I remember storming out of that court case. My brother was there. He was there with me every step of the way, because he had only lived in Colorado for a year. And I had moved in with him when I got here, and I had nothing. I had no car. I was in debt. I was trying to move my business to an online space. And so it was just, I had nothing. And then this happened, and then it felt like I really had nothing. And so I remember storming out of that court case with my brother, just being like, what the fuck? Like, how do you have all of this documentation, and you have third parties coming in showing that this person is abusive, and this person has flown here to fight this twice now? How do you not see this as like an issue? It couldn't be more flat out for you that this needs an order of protection. And she said no. And I, weeks later, had to come to the place inside of myself of seeing that experience taught me that I didn't need anybody to believe me. I didn't need anybody to say I believe you, and that my experience was always mine, and that the court system is fucked up, because that's not the only time that this happens. I've heard this from so many women. And looking at this thread now of innocence, like that was a what the fuck moment, right? Of, wow, I've created this illusion of me not being innocent. And so of course I have ended up in one relationship after the next where I am literally fighting in a way, like, for my safety and for my life, trying to wave my flag out to the world saying, I'm innocent. I'm innocent. Look at this man. Look what he's doing. I'm innocent. Right? Until one, with all of these things, I'm still not proven innocence, right? There's like that thread, there's threads in there of like, we believe you and we see you and we actually validate this entire experience, and we're not going to give you what you want. And so these illusions are just freaking magnificent. They're magnificent. Something else that follows in this is I'm somebody that explains a lot of myself. I don't know if you knew that about me, but this is why I love podcasting. I love to explain things. It's part of my design. And in relationship, I like to talk things through. I'm really good at communicating, and so I can see things from a lot of different angles, and I go in very prepared, and I preface things and all of these different things. And what I've realized over the last couple weeks, as I've just deepened my relationship with Paul, and I'm just always in personal growth spaces, is there's this part of me that likes to over-explain, and I can love her. I love this part of me that likes to over-explain, but what is it that she's trying to get by over-explaining? And what I've realized is that it's this like mechanism where, okay, if I can explain everything, perfectly, and I can get this person to see me as innocent, didn't realize that fully. But what I realized was, okay, if I can have this person see it and understand me, like I just want to be understood, because if I'm understood, then they'll see me as innocent, and then I'm safe. So this like over-explaining, explaining it from every angle, making sure that I, preface things in the right way so that they receive it in the right way, so that I am understood. What is being understood get me? It gets me to be seen as good, as innocent, hoping that this person, whoever it is on the other side, can receive me in my experience, regardless of what triggers come up for them, and can still meet me in a place of, you're safe here and I can love you here. Again, another creation, like another thread of this pattern of proving my innocence. And I would not necessarily ever consider myself like a good girl. I'm a rebel. I challenge the status quo. I dismantle systems. I'm always thinking out of the box. And although there is a lot of that within me and a part of me, it's something that feels really edgy every time. And we all experience things similarly and differently, right? So you might, I think from my own projections and understandings, I think that some humans can stand in this rebellious archetype and love it, right? And I am a rebel and I stand in it and love it. And there's this other layer underneath it that even in all of my rebellion, in all of my challenging the status quo, there's still this little bit of a good girl in it. There's still this part of me that's like, am I doing the rebellion right? See why I'm doing the rebellion. I'm rebelling because the system over here doesn't make sense. I'm rebelling because I was in an abusive household and it's not safe. And so now I'm over here doing this. But I'm going to explain why I left it, explain my rebellion so that everybody else from over here can now understand me and accept me, right? So I speak to this good girl because it's still this part of me that in a sense likes to play safe. And these are all just like illusions, right? But it's like, okay, how does that show up in me? So for an example that I want to give you is that earlier this year, I consider my year as my birth year, not necessarily like at the turn of the year. And so earlier in my birth year, a lot of what I was unwinding was these toxic behaviors with men that have been such a big part of my unlearning. But what I realized was that I don't want to be in a monogamous relationship and that I want to be polyamorous. And I know that I am. And that was a big thing for me. And there's so many parts of me that are like, why would you be scared to say that, right? Why would you be fearful? Like, you're a sex coach. You do all of these incredible things in your work and your business and your life around sex and sexual expression and authenticity. Like, why is that so hard for you? And what I can see now is that it was this part of me that still wanted to like be the good girl from this thread of innocence. Like, well, maybe I won't go venture into this poly space because then maybe I won't be seen as innocent, and then I won't be safe, and then I won't. And it's like we create in all of these patterns that we're living out and all of these illusions that we create systems around it, meaning there's the pattern itself, and then there's the beliefs that we have around the pattern, and then there's the consequences of the pattern. Does that make sense? So it's like this thread for me is the innocence. The belief that I have is that I have to be innocent because then I'm safe and blah, blah, blah. And the consequences are, if I'm not innocence, if I'm not being this like good girl, then I'm not safe. And the consequences is that I get attacked and I get beat and I get abused. And that was a lot of what I was unraveling earlier in this birth year for me. Was I kind of felt myself at not a standstill, but like internally it felt like a standstill in my business and my personal growth work, where I just didn't want to do anything. And I realized that so much of that hesitation at the time was because I was scared that if I keep growing and I keep getting this big, someone's going to attack me. Because that's the pattern in the field. The pattern in the field has been every single time I stand in my authenticity, I get attacked and abused. And I have almost always a partner, like clockwork, just slander my character and rip apart every single part of me. And I say this because it all goes back to my innocence, where it falls through for me. I had a therapist when I was moving through this ask me like, what, how can you be so, and this was my own words coming through, but like it would be frustrating to me of how can I be so sure? How can I be so clear in the knowing of who I am, so grounded in this, so embodied, like unshakable? But then, what makes the ground fall out? And what I realized was my partner, whoever it is that I'm partnered with, it's when they don't see me as innocent and they just shred me with their words. And that's when my ground falls out, and that's when I lose my sense of self. And it's from this, entire experience of abusive relationships and abuse growing up and not having getting what I needed when I was younger. But it's because they're not seeing me as innocence through my own eyes, right? So this whole thing for me has been about reclaiming my innocence and shifting from primary question to secondary question. It's like, how can I see myself as innocent in every moment? And I feel tears coming through, but I love my somatic work so deeply, so much when I'm with clients in the room, because it's a space of just unconditional love, and there are no walls and no barriers. And I've said that before here. And one of the piece that lights me up about this work, which I don't know if I'm any different than anyone else. I'm sure we experience it differently, but what moves me so deeply about this work and the spaces that I'm a part of is that we love you for all of who you are in every state. That's my mission. That's the baseline of every community that I'm a part of, is this is all of me right now. Whether it's I'm fucking angry and I'm this and I feel broken. It's like we meet you in wherever you are and we love you. And we don't want to fix, change, or improve you. We love you exactly where you're at. And so I've been working with this, even in my relationship lately. I've been like, there's almost this part of me that like tests my partner, like, okay, I'm over here and this what's up, and these parts are up for me, and can you love me here? Can you meet me here without trying to fix, change, or improve me? And when I'm with my clients, it's that same thing. It's just I love you in every part and every stage of who you are. You don't need to be anything other than what you are right now, and I love you just the same. And so this reclaiming innocence for me, how can I be innocent in everything that I do? There's been such transformation in the healing spaces that I've been a part of because I've gotten to receive that experience. I've gotten to have the experience of being loved and seen as innocent no matter what I've done or what I've been involved in, right? Like I think a lot of times we can also see our life experience and think that we have a lot of baggage and think that we're broken and who's going to love us and how could anybody love me and see me with everything that I've been through. That was a large part of what I went through after the pregnancy and I had an abortion, was who's going to fucking love me? I have so much baggage. I've been in so many shitty relationships. They're going to think it's me. They're going to think that I'm broken. They're going to think that I'm the problem. They're going to think that I'm wrong, right? Still in this illusion that I am not innocent, but we all inherently, innately are. And so that's kind of like the summary of quote unquote the work, is just loving yourself where you're at. Loving those around you exactly where they're at, seeing them as divine beings, seeing them as infinite beings, the truth of who they are despite their actions. It's like spiritual psychology 101 when I went to that school was you're not your behaviors and your actions, right? You are a human and you're having a human experience, but the truth of who you are is divine and innocent and good and whole, and the darkness is in that too. That's why the shadow work is so important. It's like the way that I see it is like we bring all of these parts of ourselves out from the shadow into the light and just see them as light and love them. And then they're not reactive. Like these parts of us were never wrong. These parts of us were never meant to be shamed or guilted, any of it. But they have been, because society has tried to keep us safe from this illusion. Like we are here playing the human game of limitation and restriction, and we're bad. Until we break out of that game, we bust loose from that game and we reclaim the truth of who we are. And then we start to play the money game in a different way. Then we start to play every game that we've wanted to play, but from a different lens, and we start to experience ourselves in whole new ways. So I wanted to share that bit with you today because that was just a big shift for me over the last few weeks, was this piece of innocence. And if I saw myself as innocent in this moment and this moment, how would I lead? How would I live my life? How would I move through the day? It would be so different than if I wasn't subconsciously, unconsciously creating experiences that make me feel wrong. Like, here's just another example is I had a human design reading the other day. I've been playing with human design system for quite a few years, but I love getting my chart read by different readers and like different interpretations, even like with astrology. And so one reader that I had the other day was talking about how part of the channels that I have is like I have a very unique style, right? And the way that I show up is striking and can be alarming to people. And it has this like otherworldly feel. Scratch that. It has this otherworldly feel, and I'm here to make that contribution. And she was saying that like we each have our different medicines, right? And my medicine isn't necessarily to it's not like a tribal medicine. It's more of me nourishing people in a different way. It's me nourishing people through my own experience, and I'm really great. My mind is great at being able to see patterns and share it with them. And so she was saying that I'm like the psychedelic medicine, right? I'm something that opens them, blasts them open. It's not this gentle medicine. And I feel as if that plays into the innocence piece too, because when I go out into the world, I have like 4 planets in Leo. So there's a lot of creative expression for me, and it's in my 11th house. I love being creatively expressed and loud, and the things that I wear, and you can see the tattoos all over my skin, right? They're a huge part of my expression. And then sometimes from the earliest age I can ever remember, I have walked through this world loving all of these same things that I love now. I was best dressed in high school. I wore stilettos every single day in high school, and I decked out in skirts and glitter. And like I was to the nine every freaking day. That was just who I've always been. But the experience that I've always had in expressing that was going out into the world and being made fun of or looked at. Like I was bullied in high school for those things, even though I was voted best dressed. It was literally, I'm just laughing at that because it doesn't even make sense, right? Like I would be bullied by the popular kids about what I would wear. And then somehow the senior class voted me as best dressed. Like, so you all fucking secretly loved what I was doing the whole time? Fuck you. It's just comical. These systems are comical. And so I can sometimes dabble in that game of dressing up, playing, presenting myself this way, and then going out into the world and being like, everyone's looking at me. I'm creating too much attention, or what are they thinking? And I love to play that game. I do. There's just a part of me that loves to play that game, and I love that part of me, and I accept her, and that's it. And when she's done playing that game, she'll be done playing that game. But I share that in this conversation because what I was thinking about the other day was like, what story is being proved there, right? The story that's being proved there is actually, to me, it feels that same way. It feels like, okay, I'm creating the experience of being on the outside, of being seen as somebody wrong or dirty or broken, right? All of those different things. So it was just another example. And it's been actually kind of interesting for me in the last few weeks because I feel like in the last few years, I've gotten a lot of tattoos, and in the last 6 months, I've gotten a lot more. Like I got my feet and my shins done, and I got my right upper arm done, which now has me sleeved on both sides. Whereas for a while, I didn't have full sleeves. I only had the lower part of my arms done. My lower tattoos didn't really look like I was heavily tattooed. And now after the tattoos that I've gotten in the last couple months, I've had to mourn the part of me that was not as tattooed. It might sound silly, but it was like an identity shift of like, oh, I'm tattooed, and am I the tattooed girl? What do people think about the tattooed girl? And Paul and I will joke around when we were in Costa Rica and stuff, and we'll be walking around, and there'll be families passing us, and we've made jokes of like, we're the anti-family. He has a neck tattoo. He's covered in tattoos. I'm covered in tattoos. And we've we've created this illusion that people have looked at us like, oh my God, who are these people, right? Like we've like named the anti-family. And so it's a joke. It's a joke that we've been playing out, but it's also like something that we can experience as something that's really real. Whereas I've had the experience of feeling like I've been looked at differently since getting more tattoos. And when I go out with them and they all show, I can see and feel how it ripples into everybody around me, and they're like almost like, oh my God, and they want to look and they want to observe, and who knows what they're thinking, right? But I share that because it's been something that I've had to actually feel the experience of, rather than just like shoving down. I've just like, wow, is this almost what women feel like? I've heard a lot of women feel and share their experience of going from, you know, not having children and then being pregnant and then having the babies and then not having a pre-pregnancy body and being treated completely different in public, right? And men not holding doors for them not really like being acknowledged. Like beauty is received very differently in the world. And so it's almost felt like a very different experience, but something that I can now probably understand, like, oh, this is what it feels like to be in the world in a different body than you've been in for the, you know, most of your life, and how people see you and treat you differently because of that, because of whatever else they're thinking. So all things that I feel are threaded into the innocence piece for me, and it's just been really beautiful. So what I want to leave you with today is, are you reclaiming your innocence? Whether or not my story hit home for you, and if there's any resonance there, how can you reclaim your innocence? How can you move in the world knowing your innate rightness, your goodness, your wholesome, infinite being, abundant self as truth? Like, how would you move differently in the world? And some other questions that you can ask yourself from this podcast is really looking for your primary question. Like, what's the pattern that you ultimately find yourself in? What's like that bottom point for you? Like I mentioned, it's, you know, when people and my loved ones don't see me as good, it's this question of what's wrong with me, and then what's the opposite of that, and how can you actually act as that and know that in every moment is where I would start. I actually wanted to add one more point to this whole story that feels almost like it concludes a lot of it. Has been that earlier this birth year, right? I said that I worked a lot on these patterns in myself, and you all know that I met my current partner, and it's been freaking magical and amazing, and we've had so many different adventures, and it's just been everything that I ever dreamed of and more. And when I was working this storyline of innocence, what I realized when I said good girl was how much Paul says that. It wasn't even a conscious thought. It wasn't even something that I was aware of until this mining of myself. And I realized like, oh, like when Paul pulls me in and embraces me, not all the time, he'll say this, but he'll say, you're such a good girl. Like, you're such a good girl. And I feel that. And so talk about creating these illusions, right? Like I've been ready to be seen as innocent. I've worked so hard on this journey to receive the love that I know I deserve and not have it be abusive and toxic and unhealthy and end up in systems. And it's not even just unraveling those patterns. I want love that's beyond that. And that's what I was ready and open for when I met Paul. I put myself in a position of saying, I'm Polly. This is every single part of me. Take me or leave me, but I know I am good and I deserve love, and I want the experience of being loved for all of these different pieces. And then I met Paul. So it feels comical to me and so divine and synchronistic for him to actually speak the words that I've wanted to hear more than ever before, which is, you're a good girl and I see your innocence. And that's, I feel like, part of why this relationship has been so healing for me and so transformative and so just everything that I have ever wanted, because I feel so seen by him. But I feel so seen by him through him seeing my goodness, through him seeing my innocence. And that is not actually something that I've ever had in a partnership. There was a moment a couple months ago where it was right at the start of me introducing him into my social media and bringing him onto my Instagram. And we were both nervous, right? It's nerve wracking in a sense. It was for us like, kind of this like, this is like your debut, or like, we feel 100% in this. And like, God, that's still scary. Like you're putting everything public. And there was a moment where I was getting out of the shower with him and I said, how does it feel for you with me bringing you into my content? And he said his response, and I remember, asking like, okay, I have Love Sex Men coming up, and I'm doing this workshop on calling in your ideal partners and lovers, and like, I'd like to share this and this. Like, is that okay with you? How do you feel about that? Is there anything that you need from me? And he shared what he shared, and then I said something like, there was a fear in me that was coming up, and I was like, I'm actually fearful that you're gonna think that I'm trying to like use this relationship to manipulate what I'm trying to accomplish in my business. Like, meaning I was asking him, is there any part of you that feels like me bringing you into my content to support me in sharing my experience to like enroll women into this program is bad? And he was like, why would I think that of you? That would mean that like I would see you as manipulative. And it was just like it was like a whole system inside of me collapsed in that moment where I was like, oh my God. Like I have every partner that I had ever had. Every partner I've ever had has never seen me as innocent. And so in every interaction we've ever had, they have always been like trying to find my bad intentions. And I've always been fighting like, why do you think I'm trying to do this that way? I'm good. I love you. Everything that I do is sourced in love, but it was never seen. And so with Paul, it's actually been everything that I've wanted. He sees me as innocent. He sees me as good at the root. And so this moment where he was like, why would I ever think that? That would mean that I think you're manipulative, was just mind-blowing to me. And I forgot to share that experience with you on this podcast, but I wanted to because I feel like it almost kind of closes the loop of like my whole life. It's been about innocence, and I've been creating these experiences and illusions where I have to fight for it, and then come full circle, I'm in this relationship with a man that sees my goodness and my innocence just innately because I within myself accepted myself as innocent finally. And I had to sit in so much sludge and muck and fucking nights of just dark nights of the soul of like, why do I keep forgetting my goodness, until I finally decided to like no more. I know my goodness, I know my innocence, and I'm going to be all of who I am in whatever way she wants to express that, because I know at the root I'm innocent. Put myself out there, and then found this man that has loved me for all of me in the way that I wanted to be loved, and has seen me for my truth. And that's just been amazing. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my story, my stories. Thank you for witnessing my journey. I hope you know that you are innocent, and you are so loved, and you are perfect in every way, and exactly where you need to be at this point in your journey. And yeah, you get to create the life that you want to create. And if you don't like where you're at, know that you have everything in your power to change it. And if you need any recommendations, resources, or support, you know where to find me. JulianneVaccaro@gmail.com. Thank you for being here, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on today's episode of The Reclamation Project. If there's anyone you feel would benefit from this conversation, go ahead, share the message so they can reclaim their personal power, and know I greatly appreciate it. I know you love this podcast, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button right at the top so you don't miss any future episodes and you stay connected with exclusive content. By leaving the Reclamation Project a 5-star iTunes review, you receive a complimentary 30-minute coaching session with me to have your pressing personal questions answered. Reach out on Instagram to set it up, and let me know what you think by sharing this episode on your social platforms. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.